The photo came through on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where I was folding laundry and thinking about what to make for dinner. My sister Emily's name flashed on the screen, a photo sent by mistake, clearly meant for someone else. I opened it without thinking. In that single second, standing barefoot on my kitchen floor, 8 years of my marriage turned into a lie. The picture showed my husband, Charles, holding 2 newborn babies. The caption underneath read, "Daddy loves you both." I didn't scream or cry. I just stood there, phone in hand, and felt something inside me go completely cold. My name is Nicole Young. I'm 38 years old, and I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days finding the small inconsistencies that people think no one will notice, the numbers that don't add up, the transactions that don't belong, the stories that almost make sense but don't quite. I built a career on trusting evidence over emotion. I just never thought I'd need those skills at home. Charles and I married when I was 30. For years, we tried to start a family. Then came the endless doctor appointments, hormone injections, and the devastating loss of 3 pregnancies. Each loss was a private grief I carried mostly alone, blaming my own body, while Charles held my hand and promised we would get through it together. My sister Emily was always there too, offering hugs and support. I never once considered that admiration and envy could wear the exact same face. When that photo arrived, Emily called me almost immediately, her voice cracking in panic, saying she didn't mean for me to find out like this. I hung up without saying a word. 8 years of forensic training had taught me one rule. When you find the first inconsistency, you don't confront the liar. You gather the evidence first. 2 days later, I sat in the office of a family law attorney named Daniel Brooks and signed the initial divorce papers. My hand didn't shake. I didn't tell Charles, and I didn't tell Emily. I went home and made dinner like nothing had happened, silently staying 3 steps ahead of them. I began digging. People who believe they will never get caught leave messy trails. Charles and I kept separate bank accounts, but we had a joint account for household expenses. Buried in the statements, I found recurring charges to a hotel in a quiet suburb. I cross-referenced the dates with my location history. 3 of those hotel stays lined up exactly with the weeks I was recovering at home from painful IVE procedures weeks Charles claimed he had to work late. Then, I checked a shared cloud folder we had set up years ago that he had forgotten to deactivate. Inside, I found photos going back 3 years. Emily standing too close to him at office parties, and weekend getaways logged as business trips. I organized every receipt, timeline, and photo into a neat, indisputable file and sent it to my lawyer. But the story was about to take a turn I never saw coming. A few days later, I received a call from Charles's mother, Margaret. We had always been close, but her voice was trembling and thin. Crying, she pleaded, "Please, don't tell him yet." I met Margaret at a local coffee shop. She looked exhausted, carrying a heavy burden. She confessed that she had been keeping a secret since the very beginning of our marriage. She assured me Emily didn't know, and neither did Charles. The secret involved Dr. Rebecca Collins, our old fertility specialist. Margaret explained that 8 years ago, a medical report addressed to Charles had arrived at her house by mistake. She opened it and was so terrified of how the truth would break her son that she intercepted it. She begged Dr. Collins to let her handle it, promising she would tell him when the time was right. But she never did. The next morning, I called Dr. Collins and demanded to see my entire medical file. When I opened the folder at her clinic, I found a report dated 8 years prior, addressed specifically to Charles. The medical language was clear. The fertility issues we had struggled with for nearly a decade had nothing to do with my body. Charles had a severe male factor condition that made natural conception virtually impossible. I sat in that quiet office as years of self-blame vanished. Every tear I had shed, every painful procedure I had endured, and every apology I had whispered to him in the dark, believing I was a failure, none of it belonged to me. But then, another realization hit me like a physical blow. If Charles was medically unable to have children, then the newborn twins my sister had just given birth to could not possibly be his. Emily had either cheated on him, or she was caught in a massive lie of her own. Charles had been staying with Emily, playing house with 2 infants whose true parentage he didn't understand. A few days later, Margaret called me to say Charles was bringing Emily and the babies to her house so she could meet them. Margaret told me she was finally ready to stop hiding. When they arrived, Charles proudly showed his mother the twins and said, "Mom, you're finally a grandmother." Looking at those babies, Margaret's strength gave out. She looked at Charles and whispered, "Wait, she didn't tell you." Margaret walked into her study, unlocked her safe, and brought out the original medical report she had hidden for 8 years. She placed it on the coffee table. Charles picked it up, reading the lines slowly as his entire reality shifted. He looked at his mother, his voice flat. This says, "The reason we couldn't have kids was never her. I let her think it was her fault. She apologized to me, Mom, and I let her." Emily went entirely pale. She knew what this meant. If the report was true, the babies in her arms, conceived during her affair with Charles, were not his. The affair, the secret family, and the future they had built on the wreckage of my marriage crumbled in a matter of minutes. Furious and broken, Charles stormed out, grabbed his keys, and drove straight to my house. He arrived at my porch at 9 that night, holding the creased report, looking completely undone. "Nicole, you knew, didn't you?" he asked. "I found out 2 weeks ago," I replied calmly, "the same way I found out about Emily." He broke down, claiming he had no idea, blaming his mother's silence for everything that had gone wrong. I let him finish. Then I looked at him and said, "You're wrong, Charles. This didn't start with your mother's secret. It started the day you decided that whatever you felt was missing at home, you were entitled to go find with my sister, all while letting me believe my body was failing us. A medical report explains the pain, but it doesn't erase your choices." He had no answer. The divorce moved forward exactly as planned. 3 weeks later, the paperwork was signed. Charles sold his share of his company and moved to another city. Emily moved out of state with the twins, unable to face the truth of what she had done. I used a portion of my divorce settlement to start a foundation that helps couples navigate infertility with absolute transparency, ensuring no woman ever carries a burden of blame that isn't hers to bear. Looking back at those 8 years, I feel no bitterness, only gratitude for the person I became. I spent almost a decade believing I had failed, but I know now that I never did. I simply trusted people who weren't honest enough to deserve my trust. Sometimes, the ultimate victory isn't about getting even. It is simply refusing to carry someone else's lies any longer.